That's a fire truck, not me, I assure you. Well, hello, everyone. It is 5:02 on a Tuesday afternoon for us. Our guest today is joining us from sunny Japan, and it is 7 in the morning tomorrow for him. So let's bring him on. Baro,
Jamie,
how are you, bud?
very good. And yourself?
I am doing great. Thank you very much. Sorry about the mix-up yesterday. But
Not a problem. Not a problem.
these things happen in international diplomacy.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm so used to it now, so not a problem
Very
at all.
good. Well, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Right. So I'm Baro. I live in Tokyo. Right now I'm doing something called the esports advisory at a big four consulting firm based in Tokyo. And I guess part of the reason why I'm here today is I recently released a book called Demystifying Esports, and I basically consult my clients on gaming and esports and entertainment.
Very cool. And yeah, trying to add you here. God damn. Talk about esports. I can't even control the goddamn computer. Yeah, so esports, obviously, it's something that I've been hearing about for years, while it existed in the periphery. But now I don't know if it's mainstream, but it's a lot closer to mainstream. Is that just my impression, or is that, is that actually what's happening there? When I say there, I know Japan in terms of technology and things like that. I know you guys are way ahead of us. So in terms of esports, maybe becoming mainstream or more prevalent, where are you guys in that?
Yeah, so Jamie, that's a great question. And actually, the US is leading the market in this space. And I guess it depends on how you define mainstream, but in my mind, I think it's quite a mainstream nowadays. And if you look into, say, the number of viewership or the market size, or sorry, that's my morning alarm.
Wake up.
Right. And so this is not an overnight phenomenon. It's been there actually since the 90s in some countries, and lately, especially after COVID, it's been getting a lot more attention. So a lot of places around the world, including the US, China, Korea, or like Germany, and some places in Europe, are very, very mainstream, right, I would say right now. I mean, but from a general public, I found that there's still many people who has not heard much about esports, and it's still kind of distance they may feel. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, because I think there's more to say, and if you actually look into it, there's actually a history behind it. And back to your question, Jamie. So Japan is actually a little slow on esports to our surprise.
Really?
So yeah.
Okay. So the United States is, further ahead, you would say, than Japan.
Yeah, I mean the market size wise, I think it's number two. The U.S. is,
Oh, wow.
and so there's two things going on. So have a video gaming market, and at the
Mhm.
same time we have the esports market, which is two distinguished thing. So video gaming market is the actual gaming that you like, the game companies making the game itself, right? But then esports is really about that competition, people playing based on those games and competitively. And a lot of people like myself watch them as a viewership experience. So it's more has more flavor to like a traditional sports experience. Like it's really the viewership, spectator sports. So US in both sense, gaming and esports is one of the top market in the world, whereas Japan is number three video gaming market. But when it comes to esports, it's actually just started, I would say.
Okay, so I'm not too bright, Baro. So what is the difference between esports and video gaming?
Yeah, absolutely. No, no. I mean, Jamie, that's a great question, and that's one of the things I try to do at my book. So everybody knows what video gaming is nowadays, and it's
Mhm.
really about that. It's. I mean, I would say the industry is very focused on the player who plays the video game itself,
Sure.
right? And so it's the gaming company who creates that gaming content, and it's people like myself or my kids who gets really excited about get to play it. But what makes esports different from video gaming is, as I said, it's really the viewership. So the core part of it is that it's fun to watch people playing video game. That's really it. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
Right.
I,
I
I
mean,
would I would have disagreed with you 2 years ago. And I still, frankly, get very little out of it. But I have a 13-year-old son who loves it.
yeah.
Like he can watch other people play video games all freaking day. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, if you go back, like when I was growing up in the '90s, like in the arcades, there were like Street Fighters or Mortal Kombat. And if you think, if I go back, there were people in the arcades that people gather around who are pretty good at it
sure.
and just watching it, right? So I would say it's the extension of that experience. It gets more, it's more, it's more on steroid, I would say. But like I have two sons, and they play like Fortnite like crazy every day,
Yeah.
and yeah, and that for them, other people playing good Fortnite is also a very very good content to watch, entertaining content to watch, and that's what esport is. So it's really that competitive nature of how people playing games and how good they are, and they're just so good. The professional players are so good beyond certain level. So
Yeah.
it's very entertaining to watch. And for example, for your kids or my kids, they learn a lot by watching it, how to be a good player. Or for example, like my wife, who doesn't play a game at all, but she just
Mhm.
watches gaming on YouTube, because there are a lot of gaming channels. And it's like same level as listening to a radio station.
Okay. 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 Yeah. That's different. But I know here, um, and I don't know how it is in Japan, but in the United States, the gambling market really drives a lot of things. Even though sports
Mm,
gambling was just recently
mm,
fully ish legalized,
mm,
um, gambling has driven professional sports forever.
mm,
And it seemed like, at least to me, that during the shutdown portion of the pandemic, when people were looking for anything to bet on,
mm,
a lot of these video gaming things became options on the betting sites.
mhm.
Um, and I tried, like, shit, I bet on it, but,
Yeah.
I didn't know what the Christ I was watching.
Yeah.
I tried to watch it, and the World of Warcraft, I think, is
Mhm.
one of them.
Mm,
That
mm,
was on ESPN at
yeah,
like
yeah.
2 in the morning. I don't know what I'm watching, but I didn't win. Um, so is there the gambling aspect to it in Japan? Or is it like you're telling me that people just tune in to watch people play video games?
So absolutely. So gambling aspects is in some countries are pretty big in esports. So not in Japan, it's still illegal, but
Mhm.
some countries, like say over in Europe, I think Malta is legal. There are
Oh,
several countries that
they'll bet on anything in
yeah,
Europe.
that is being legalized. Or for example, places like South Korea, where I'm originally from, It's some portion are legal, but most of the portion are illegal. But there's still a black market
Sure.
behind the scene going on. So definitely, esports is same, competitive, has the same competitive nature. So it's a very good medium for betting.
All right. And
Yeah.
so, when we're talking about esports and their popularity, what are some of the more popular, platforms or games that, people watch and that people play?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are just shitload of genres of game and titles, as you know, right? But
Hmm.
in the esports world, I think there's mainly two genres for you to know that is the most popular. So one is called it's a real time strategy game, and for example, League of Legends, Dota 2, StarCraft, these are World of Warcraft. These are the
Yep.
games that are type of real-time strategy game, RTS, and some of them are called MOBA, multiplayer online arena. So basically what it does is that you're playing as a team, if it's say League of Legends, 5 on 5, and you have your own character, and they call it champion, and you're basically leveling up your champion while battling against your enemy, against your the opposing team. And depending on the champion, you have different skill set, and as you level up you gain more skill set, and depending on the what champion you choose, there are different strategy that you have to think of to win against. So it's very, you have to think about the strategy constantly, and how, how you're coordinating with your other team members, and in order to win. And usually it's takes about half an hour, about one match. So that's one very popular genres of game. And another one is called FPS, first person shooter, or a third person shooter, TPS. So
Yep.
it's very popular nowadays, like Fortnite, Call of Duty, Rainbow Six, or Valorant. So very, easy to
Yep.
understand. It's like a
My
wartime shooter.
son plays Call of Duty almost nonstop.
Yeah. So there we go. So that's another very, very popular genre of game in the indie and esports space. And of course, we got other sports genres that everybody knows the rule by heart, like FIFA or Madden or NBA 2K whatsoever. But compare, like, if you look at the market size, it's relatively smaller compared to the two that I mentioned.
Yeah, and that was something that really surprised me.
Mhm.
If you would have asked me during my formative years, or when I played a lot of video games, if you would have told me this is going to be a thing, esports or whatever, I would have bet almost anything that it would be sports games, whether it's Madden or NBA 2K, because I know back in the day when you actually had to be at someone's house to play a video game with them,
Right.
there'd be four or five of us at one of our houses, with a bong and a controller just playing video games for hours.
Yeah.
But, I guess we never played a lot of the shooter games. All that stuff is a relatively new thing.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
so why is it that you think that the sports games kind of took a back burner?
Yeah, so I think it's part of the reason is that, like, the sports crowd and the gaming crowd is were fundamentally different, right?
Sure,
And
fair.
esports is, I mean, because of the names, there's sports in it. People tend to associate it's an extension of traditional sports, but it's actually not. So it actually starts from a video gaming crowd. And in the video gaming world, actually, the instead of the sports genres, it was actually the real time strategy or FPS that were way more popular.
Hmm.
If you look back, where esports really started off, say back in South Korea, it started off from RTS game, real time strategy game like StarCraft, which was from the United States. So
Yep.
it has that origin. So I would say so that kind of took the momentum. And if you look into other part of the country around the world, like say in China or also in the States, it first started from RTS. So League of Legends was a big thing when it was taking off in the States around around like before a little before 2010. And there was also, it's a side topic, there was also that new platform that came out called Twitch.
Mhm.
You're probably watching a lot, so it's set that viewership platform along with YouTube was a big sign for it to take off.
Yeah. And it really is incredible that, I mean, yeah, we're probably talking the last 5 years where it's really taken off. But in terms of the connectivity
Mm,
that, literally when I get home tonight, I can turn on my video game console and play a game against you or
yeah.
with you against someone. I mean, it's really incredible the technology.
Exactly. I mean, I'm the same, generation when you were growing up with gaming, right? So I have a Super Nintendo, I had a Nintendo PlayStation, and it was about, people I call up my friends and get out my place and maybe some snacks or something and play some good game together. And but maximum it could be like 4 people. I mean, that's because that's a number of
Yeah.
control that you can play at once. But nowadays with all the, connectivity, as you said, and also the communication channel that you can actually use it while playing gaming. Like this, voicing is standard nowadays. So, for example, I play Fortnite with my iPad, and whenever my sons are online, we just struck up a room together and play together, and and they play with their own Nintendo Switches. So wherever I am, so that's pretty astonishing if you think about it. Like back in
It
20
really
years
is.
ago, you know.
Right. It really is. And I understand you're a doctor, but probably not a sociologist.
No.
Um, can I mean, what do you think? What impact, if any, do you think this will have on children today? Who, you and me back in our day, if we had a day off from school or whatever, we're calling our buddies and the three or four of us or whatever are going
Right,
to spend the day together in
right.
physical proximity.
Mm,
Where now, my son can sit in the basement all day. I can hear him talking and play games, but he's sitting by himself.
yeah.
Um, how do you think that's going to have any impact?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's both sides going on. So there's going to be positive and also negative side. And as I'm speaking that as a parent, of course. And
Sure.
the positive side of it is that, I mean, I mean, it's like, I would say the level of intensity that the games nowadays with all the connectivity and all the the interesting stuff going on that our children get involved is very compared to 20 years ago, it's probably a couple of magnitude more, so they can get really into it. And the good news is that because we have this thing industry called esports, if they're really serious about it, they could even think of a career out of that. So for example, they could be a professional esports athlete, or they could be an event organizer. There's very many career path out of this. So that's one positive thing that we when I grew up, we didn't have that kind of career path. So
No.
no. so so it was only an entertainment, like a casual entertainment or a hobby, right?
Mhm.
So that's one positive side, I would say. And but on the other hand, there's also the negative side of it. I'm speaking this as a parent, right? So because it's so intense, there's so much, so much interesting thing going on for our children, it's hard to ignore. And once you sit down, it tends to be hours and hours, and not only because the content itself is so much fun, it's also because it's a place where you hang out with your friends.
Right. And it's
Right.
immersive. I mean, it
Yeah,
really
exactly.
does. it really does engage all of your senses.
Mhm.
Hopefully not smell, but if you sit there long enough, probably even that.
Right, right. So exactly, it's very immersive. So in other words, that if you just let your children just to be sucked into that space, it may they may never come back. Maybe it's just it's such an immersive space right now. So if you think of like, eh, I'm speaking this as a parent, like
Of
if
course.
you want your children to be more sociable in reality or spend more time with your family, I would say there are definitely a lot more, hooks in the virtual space nowadays that your children have the temptation not to come back, for example.
Right. And my question, in addition to that, um, but I mean, what do you think? Obviously, we're guessing here,
Mhm.
but 10 years down the road, this generation that grew up on online video gaming, do you think that their interpersonal communication skills are going to be set back any? I mean,
Um,
I have a
mm,
hard time believing or seeing how they couldn't be.
yeah, I mean, I would. That's a great point, actually. So, you know, let me take that and so what I've seen here, this is more in a positive spin. So, a lot of people playing games in Japan, a lot of the kids here as well. But through gaming, especially online gaming, a lot of these kids' first time experience speaking with a foreign national is through gaming. And like a lot of the parents here and the kids themselves have the interest about learning English and being connected with people overseas, but it tends to be in the form of going to, say, cram school, and you meet your teacher there and they learn through textbook and all that. But for example, through Fortnite, you get to play anybody around the world, and I mean, so they are put into our children are put into a situation where they have to speak up in order to to coordinate with the team, and they may not speak a word of English, but at least
Right.
they are put on that spot for the first time in their life, but in a very entertainment setup. So so it naturally kind of pushes them to kind of get into that position and actually have to have the courage to speak up, and that kind of builds up to their learning curve to learn a new language, for example. And there is a new business based on that here, actually, so learning English through Fortnite recently, by the
That's
way,
funny. Well,
right?
because
So
there's probably a lot of words and phrases that you'd use in gaming that you're not going to learn at camp.
mm-mm, mm-mm. So I mean, and and we know that. I'm not saying that that's always going to be a very polite phrases and words in the
Sure,
gaming
sure.
space, but I mean, but I think it's really important to have that like that experience, that firsthand experience with an actual person, whether that being online or offline. And I think in that sense, I look at it more a positive spin, that that will have a more social, being more social with other person outside of their comforting zone.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that aspect of it, and you're exactly right. When I was growing up, if I wanted to talk to, I couldn't even do a prank call to somebody in Japan because it'd be traced back to me.
Yeah,
Um,
right, cool. Yeah.
but yeah. So there were really, you're right. The world is very small, and it gets smaller and
Mm,
smaller.
mm,
And maybe that is something, um, whether it's breaking stereotypes of different nationalities or different people, or just breaking that ice,
mm,
where someone, my son's age, your son's age, whatever, and I
yeah.
don't even know what sort of, honestly, if I were to say a Japanese stereotype, I'd say that you guys are all good at video games. And if I played a video game with you, I'd probably have the same impression,
Mm,
but But the fact that children and adolescents, whatever might be in their head about different nationalities is, well, I don't know. I played with this one dude. He didn't seem like the Antichrist, or, there's all sorts of.
It reminds me, like even before this era, there were for example, through Twitter, like there were Twitter friends, like people that never met offline before, but they became so close to Twitter, communicating over Twitter. At one day they meet up offline and they call themselves Twitter friends, and and it's the opposite. The way we grow, like we first get to know person offline, and then maybe try to be connected through Facebook or something, and try to give say hello to each other once in a while. But nowadays, like my kids, or the so-called the digital natives, like it's really the opposite. It could be through Twitter, it could be through some other social network, but nowadays it's really the gaming part of it. So they may play gaming on a weekly basis or a daily basis together. It would be my kid with another kid from Sweden or somewhere, and one day, after years, they may have a chance to travel to each other's place, and they actually get to meet up each other, and that's just the way it is nowadays, I guess.
Yeah, and that's cool. And you're right. That is and one that I hadn't thought of, but that is a very positive thing. Because certainly in the past, when you look at history and different countries or nationalities that were vilified or propaganda, and the main point of propaganda is to not see someone as a human being. And the fact that the younger generation, hopefully they won't fall for that bullshit, because they're going to say, really? Because I know a couple dudes in Japan and, a few in Korea and this one guy in Sweden. I don't know. They seem pretty cool to me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess that's one thing that helps really is that, if through gaming, it's really that content. And, if that, say, Jamie likes Call of Duty, and I used to play, I still play with him. And as a same human being, I like Call of Duty and he likes Call of Duty. How can I hate this person, I know this guy who loves the same game that I love it. And so there's that association going on. So I think in that sense, it helps breaking that, whatever prejudice that we might have against another country or another race or with whatever background,
Yeah, I completely agree. Is there a go-to language in esports?
English, I would say. I mean,
when
it comes, yeah. Like I would say it really depends on the game. And so here's the thing: a lot of the games so they basically provide, globally, right? But then, so this is not a one giant space actually. So a lot of these big games have different servers depending on the region. So we have a North American server, like an Asian server, and European server, etc. So depending on which server that you be connected, it's probably the dominant language may be different.
Okay.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that depending on the server, so it also just depends on the game. But people get to know, like, okay, the characteristics of that. So say, for example, I don't know, like if you go to, like, say, Asian server, and if you meet, say, a 7-year-old elementary school student, that he's gonna beat the crap out of you because they're just so good at it. For example, that's sort of like a cultural background. Like the level of the difficulty of these players as an opponent, but also like culturally, like some place may play very gently, some place may play a little with more communication going on, or etc. etc.
Yeah, and that to me is really, really interesting. And maybe a generation from now will be subject of more study, is how different nationalities or different countries, the strategies that they use in video games. I can't really speak to League of Legends or anything like that, because I don't play those games. I don't get them. And if there is any strategy, I don't see it. But, for like sports games, which I would be able to recognize, if I said that's so weird because most of the Europeans play a zone defense. And, it seems that the Eastern region, they all play full court defense.
Yeah.
So something like that, I think, would be interesting. And I don't know if there are, again, I don't want to say stereotypes because of the negative connotation, but are there things that if you're playing against a team from America, you say, all right, guys, this is how they're going to play it?
That's a really interesting point, Jamie. And like I can tell from my experience. So I can't speak much about like today's games, but I'm pretty sure there are. But from when I was growing up with this game called StarCraft, there were different strategies depending on the nationality and depending on the region. And so because these so-called real-time strategy games it's really a decision-making games where
Yep.
at what time, well, what kind of resource that you make at what timing, etc., etc. So you can clearly tell that they have a different thought process going on. For example, from a Korean player against, say, a European player, and so like I'm sure this is sort of a topic that if you ask a professional caster or a commentator, he can talk about it forever. But my quick answer is that yes, there definitely is a pattern of different thought process behind the strategy within the game, and I'm sure some games have more visibility of the outcome of that strategy, and some
And it
games
makes
have.
sense. It makes perfect sense that it would. Just like I imagine that there are a lot of foreign developers working on the Madden video game, even though the NFL is basically American football. It's not played really anywhere else.
Right.
So, that is a very American game, so it would be interesting to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And it's very, how to put it, it's very refreshing to see a game. For example, StarCraft was very dominant by these South Korean players who are really good at it. So, but in a sense that as a nation, like the entire user base, the community has a similar thought process. You got to do this at this point, at this at that point. But then you see this international events where a lot of different national get together and see other national play, and they have a complete different strategy, and that's eye opening, And I actually never thought of that. You can actually do that, and it's like I've seen a match that happened a few years ago. It was StarCraft 2, and it was the finals were with the one was the South Korean player, another one's a Canadian player, and I could tell that they have a completely different thought process, and
Sure.
which was really it was really entertaining to watch it actually. So I think it's kind of fits your point what you're saying.
Yeah, that is interesting and not surprising, but yeah. So are you a sports fan? Do you watch a lot of sports?
I used to. So I used to follow a lot of soccer, football, European
Okay.
football, EPL. So while I was living, I mentioned about it, while I was living in Buffalo, I learned how to watch hockey because of the Sabres. And I when I was living in I was living in Ann Arbor, Michigan afterwards, and I followed a little bit of American football there. But nowadays, yeah, I don't really watch that much traditional sports, but which is a shame.
Yeah. I mean, because this, I think watching the evolution of video games and sports on television, it really seems that in the 90s, they tried to make video games look more like the product you saw on television. But now it really seems that they are trying to make the product you see on television match the video game. And it's just weird how that dichotomy flipped.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean,
It's
I never thought of that actually. So when you say television products, so what do you mean by that
like
specifically?
if you're watching a basketball game
Right?
and you'll see a camera angle and say,
Oh
that's a
yeah.
that's a cool angle, but where the hell did they get that idea? Oh yeah, NBA 2K10
Yeah.
introduced that camera angle.
Right.
Like, and obviously in a video game, you're much less constricted
Mhm.
because there is no actual camera. You can put whatever point of view you'd like. And then, for sports and television executives to have to try to mimic that, but they do because they have to get younger people interested in sports. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Um, but, it is very funny to see, what we used to sit down and watch in terms of sporting events and then watch them today and be like, what do they have? 3 cameras there?
Yeah. I mean, like video gaming, yes, but recently I've also seen something interesting about in the VR space. So it's like, for example, the professional baseball scene here, they as one of the team, they actually use VR technology so that for their team fans, they can put their VR gear on it and they can be completely immersive underground, and you can be at whichever angle, like wherever you want to be underground, so that you could be right by the pitcher, for example, and you will have the exact same,
And
that
you're
view.
watching the game from there.
Yeah, yeah, from there, and that's
Sweet.
fascinating. That's something that we would never have that in 20 years ago, right? So I think that goes along the way with what you just said in the video gaming space as well. So a lot of the offline broadcaster are learning from this new technology that what could be a more entertaining content or viewpoint from a viewer perspective, and not abiding by any physical constraints.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, yeah, just talking about baseball, if you would have told me 20 years ago that there's a microphone in first base so that you can hear the foot hit and the
Mm,
ball hit the glove, get the fuck out of here,
yeah.
But
Exactly. Like, why do you need that for,
it,
right?
right. And baseball is probably a great example because
Mm,
there is so little that goes on the field. It goes in spurts for sure.
mm,
But yeah, the camera angles that they have, um, you know,
yeah.
it seemed to come right over the pitcher's shoulder, all of those things, and really the AI type stuff. Do they still have umpires in Japanese baseball?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, still they do. But I think, was it baseball or soccer? I think they try to mix of it. So like a referee, like a human referee and an AI referee.
I know
So
soccer has a microchip in the
mm,
ball
mm,
so that when it goes in the goal,
hmm,
it's in the goal. But
yeah,
I feel like they only use that for the World Cup. I don't
mm,
understand why that technology is not everywhere. But,
mm,
I mean, do you
yeah.
golf?
Not yet.
Okay. I suck
Mm.
at golf, but I don't understand why there's not a computer chip in a golf ball so that I can look at my phone and find my ball.
Yeah.
The chips are not expensive. Golf
Mm,
balls are. How
mm,
much more can it cost
mm,
to have a
mm,
GPS?
mm-hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's funny how sports and technology really seem to drive a lot of these innovations and inventions. Uh,
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, like, sports performance and special, like, there are a lot of things going on in sports technology over here in Japan. And I mean, part of it has to do with the supposedly Tokyo Olympics this year.
all right.
And so there was a lot of investment going on. There are a lot of startups working on the sports technology before the past couple of years. And back to that, the cameras, in the stadium kind of work. So it's interesting because if you think of it as before, if you tried to change the angle and try to find out which is the most entertaining part of it, it for company to do that, it takes a lot of investment. For example, you have to buy the gear, the cameras, and actually try out an offline which is the best installment for the viewer,
Hmm.
and it's just trying the testing out. It takes a lot of hassle and
Hmm.
resources. But nowadays, and you can do that beforehand. The gaming world, that you said, and in the VR, which is that if you already have that, resources, it's something that comes from free. So you get a better idea within that virtual space, and then try to mimic that in the offline. So that's what you were alluding to before. So that's so in that sense, it completely makes sense from a business perspective too. It saves a lot of resources for the company to do so.
Yeah, you don't need to do the research because it's already done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, you can see, okay, this is what we're trying to achieve. This
Mm.
is what we want it to look like.
Right,
And then what are the impediments?
right.
But yeah, it's very funny in terms of technology because I mean, I know, and the two might be related, but there's times that I'm at my house trying to do a show like this and I'm getting shitty signal and whatever, but I can hear my son just fine playing his Call of Duty and he hasn't skipped a beat.
Yeah.
So where we would think that, international communications in terms of business and things,
Mm,
this is important stuff. But
mm.
you and I can't get on a Skype call where we can understand each other. But if we're playing Call of Duty, we can, chat all day.
Yeah, exactly. You have that same content going on that both party has the interest, and I mean, even if you don't speak each other, you share the same experience, and that's a lot. That's a lot. You know.
Yeah. So let's talk about your book a little bit. What made you decide, you know what, I've got to write this book?
Yeah. So doing this esports advisory at my firm, I face a lot of clients, and a lot of the time, I realize that at the end of the day, these so-called people in the executive or C-suite, uh, they like the business prospect, but they don't really understand what's going on. Like, because part of the reason has to do with because they didn't grow up with video games. So they're like my parents' generation.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, so this is kind of unfortunate because there's a lot of business opportunity, but at the same time, culturally, it's a huge thing for. I mean, I grew up with it, and also my kids, for our younger generations, it's a big deal for them. So I thought that there's a huge generation gap, and at the same time, my mother-in-law actually still thinks that gaming is evil, and so
Sure.
she got yeah, and she cares of my kids on a daily basis, and she got one day she got really pissed because my younger son played too long of Fortnite, so she ended up cutting the charging code of his Nintendo Switch with a pair of scissors. So it was like, okay, I got I was like, there's clearly something going on here. Not maybe not business, but more in the generation gap side. So then
Yeah.
I realized that, I as someone who grew up in South Korea and saw all the things that happened when esports was taking off, I thought maybe I could share this experience in the form of book. So my mind was that I don't know if you know Anthony Bourdain. So
Yeah.
one of my favorite book was his Kitchen Confidential. And I
Mhm.
know shit about cooking, but if you read that book, you learn a lot about chef behind the kitchen whatsoever, that first-hand experience. So I wanted to write a Kitchen Confidential but esport version of that, so that like my parents or my mother-in-law who would probably never play a video game for the rest of their life, I don't know, But by reading that book, they get to understand what it is about and why people are very excited. The younger generation are excited about, so that we can try to bridge that gap a little bit. So it's really that I wanted to share the historical aspect. What happened for the past 2 decades in South Korea and around the world that made esports what it is, and and so that they have a better idea of what might happen in the future.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense because, when you think of startups or something like that, you need money. And who has the money? It's typically not teenagers. So while the esport athletes are, younger people, ultimately someone considerably older had to spend a considerable amount of their money to give them that platform. And if they don't understand it, them being the older folks, it's never going to happen.
Exactly. So being a Big Four consulting firm, a lot of our clients are big clients, big corporate clients, enterprises. So at the end of the day, it's going to be either a CEO who's making the decision, and they have the power to move a lot of capital from their firm. But at the same time, if they don't understand, if you don't convince them, it's not going to happen. And that was the first thing that I faced a lot over here in Japan. Like, although it's a huge gaming nation, they know what video gaming is. They may not played it, but when it comes to esports and why people are excited about and this new industry, it was very hard to find people who really understands it, and also the business prospects of that. So
yeah, and frankly, who gives a shit if they understand it? But it's got to be hard to get them to spend their money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If I were wealthy and someone came to me and said, hey, we've got this thing, it is going to be it in 10 years. You get to get in on the ground floor and say, all right, well, what is it?
Yeah.
And they tell me about TikTok or some shit, kids dancing and singing. No, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Right.
So it probably took a leap of faith at some point for someone, and really it probably comes from having younger trusted advisors, someone who says, Baro, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. This doesn't make any sense to me, but I also know that you've never wasted my money before, so
let's just try
what's it going to take?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So what do you do at your company?
So I lead this. I'm formally trained as an engineer. I was an R&D engineer for past 10 years before I joined this firm. And so when I joined this firm 3.5 years ago, I was more of a tech consultant. But then I started this, esports advisor as a sort of a side project. But then it really took off a year or two ago. So now it's a full-time commitment. I lead a team, and we're specialized. So now we sort of call ourselves a digital content advisory. So basically, we basically advise our clients who's a corporate enterprise doing a strategy, business planning, or strategy or implementation towards this either esports, gaming, or some sort of entertainment market where it has some sort of an IP going on around. So that's one. Also, we provide think tank service for the government. So, for example, Japanese government, so that they can make a future public policy on these in this industry. And third is that we also teach at university here locally. We provide esports gaming related curriculums so that students get to know that it's not only about playing games. There's a huge different a lot of different careers or path behind it, and also a lot of business aspects around it. So we provide a professional curriculum at the university here.
So I had a friend who was in the military, and he liked video games as well. He was a young guy. So he would say, he had told me that like him and his army buddies would play Call of Duty, and they would use their actual army training, to for maneuvers and all that bullshit. But my question is, if professional sports leagues have picked up on the things that video games are doing successfully and well, it would be foolish to think that our militaries haven't done the same thing, right?
You know what? So what I've heard is that like in the US, was it the Air Force or the US Army? Like they already have a internal like a esports team because I've saw a
I've
news
heard
article.
I've heard that, yes.
Right. So which was really cool. And back in South Korea too, actually the Air Force of South Korea, they had at one point for a few years a professional esports team where, you like, the South Korean citizen has the military duty for 2 years.
Mhm.
And but for the really good esports players back then, the legendary players, they can continue their career if they get to be part of that team. So so it was supported by the government. I mean, now it's
Sure.
gone, but so it's if so one thing I found with this thing going on with esports and gaming is that it's there's just so much different places that you can take a bite of it. It's like the military part of it, that's one educational part, or healthcare. There's just so much dimensions that you can take a look into it, and it's really up to the person who has the interest, who has the commitment to drive it. So for me, it's like a gold mine. There's just so much you can do about it. Of course there's also risk, but I think we all, like, people who's involved in this industry, we see more of the upside out of this activity, way more than the risk or the negative side of it. So that's been my experience so far.
Yeah, I can see that. VR isn't huge here yet, I don't
Mm,
think. These things get away from me, but it seems to be a lot more prevalent in Japan. VR here seems to be one of those things that we've heard about for 20 years
yeah.
that, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Well, it's not here yet, I don't
Mm,
think. Again,
mm,
I
mm,
could be
right.
wrong. But absolutely, the benefits there. I mean, I guess COVID and all of the resulting changes in social behavior, I think that they're going to shape esports and virtual reality interaction. I think that probably the pandemic is going to be something 20 years from now. If you have to put your finger on something and say, this was the moment that, it wasn't just video gamers who knew what we did. This was the moment that everybody was aware of esports, whether they knew what it was, whether they could pick it out of a lineup. No, but they were aware that it was a thing.
Yeah,
So
I totally agree. I totally agree. Totally.
so where what do you see for the future of esports?
So, I think it's definitely gonna accelerate. It's continue going in a two-digit growth, revenue wise worldwide. It's gonna grow, and we have regional differences in terms of development. Like some places are more developed, some places are just starting, and depending on the region, the games that is based on PCs or video consoles are more developed, or places like in Southeast Asia, like mobile gaming is more popular. So it's going to keep on, that the growth is going to keep on accelerate. But at the same time, at some point we may see some sort of a bubble pop, because that's what happened in South Korea. And part of it has to do with, say, for example, illegal betting. That could be
Mhm.
something that may have some portion of the bubble pop, which I don't think it's a bad thing. But it's a necessary evil thing as an industry to grow. So
Yeah.
there's that. But at the same time, from a content perspective, all these gaming or entertainment content, for example, Netflix dramas and all that, these are all being mashed up together. So these different IPs, so you're having a Pokemon anime, but you also have a Pokemon game. You have an esports drama in China. So we have this like layer of different content IPs being mashed up together, which I think it's going to accelerate as well. And I see a lot of business potential there.
I agree. So what is the best way for someone to find your book? I know this is the link to the Google Books.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, so it's available Amazon worldwide.
Amazon?
Yeah.
Sure. I had that link, but some people...
I can send you. I'll send you right away.
Okay. Because I know some people don't like sending people to Amazon to buy their books, which I get it. If you sell it yourself, I want you to make the money, not Amazon. But Amazon's probably pretty broke. Maybe they could use it. But yeah, so I will put up. Oh, okay. There you go. You just sent it to me. Perfect.
Yeah, that's a magic link. So wherever you're based, if you click on that, that's gonna guide you to the closest Amazon, the region.
Look at that. See, it's true. Japanese people are really good at video games and computers. Like, it took me 20 minutes, and I put the wrong link up. Yeah, that is perfect. So, I mean, can you see maybe esports being used, for nefarious purposes, or whether it's an unintended consequence or something?
So we had a case in Korea, if you're talking about that. So we had a fixed game scandal back in 2010. Yeah, and that really put a stop on the growth in South Korea. We have a lot of people losing their jobs in esports, and based on that, because the major news media really took that seriously. So it was all over the news, and a lot of the people who didn't know much about esports get to know about esports through that incident, which is the first negative part of it. So it's something that, because there's that competitive nature, and that there could be a lot of thing on stake, whether who's winning or who's losing.
Sure.
Like traditional sports. So there needs to be a lot of risk, management, or like we even say, like governance and compliance be installed behind the scene. So, but in other words, that's a lot of work for us as for grown-ups to do.
Right.
It's not only a kids play. This is for grown-ups. There's a lot of work to do for grown-ups as well for this to be sustainable.
Yeah, that's very true. I've often said that you show someone an opportunity, and someone else is going to see an opportunity to steal something. So,
yeah.
And someone else sees an opportunity to police it. So, well, Baro, I want to thank you very much for your time. I'm glad we were able to get together. You've got your whole day ahead of you, right?
Yeah, just starting.
Perfect. Well, there's the link where people can find your book on Amazon. I really appreciate your time. Anything else you want to plug? Say hello to the kids or anything like that?
No, well, thanks for having me, Jamie, for this wonderful conversation. I enjoyed a lot. And if anybody wants to reach me directly, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can just look me up and just say hi. Or if you want to shoot me an email, demystifyingesports@gmail.com. That's where you can reach me directly. So feel free to shoot me an email if anything. So anyway, so a lot of fun speaking with you, Jamie, and great to be here again.
Absolutely. Give me 1 second. Let me put this up. demystifyingesports@gmail.com. Because this is recorded, so people theoretically will see it after the fact, and we'll just make sure we get it up there so those people with point and click fingers now have your email address.
Awesome.
Baro, thank you so much. Keep in touch. Let me know what's on the horizon, because probably what's happening there will be popular here in 3 years, and I'll look like a real trendsetter.
Definitely, Jamie. Let's keep in touch.
All right. Take care,
All right.
bud. Thank you.
Cool.
All right. So that was Baro from Japan, and that was really cool. So I would recommend his book, if Demystifying Esports. So maybe if your kids are playing all sorts of these damn video games and you don't know what's going on, but you'd like to check out his book, Demystifying Esports. If you want to shoot him an email, it's right there. Perfect. So thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. I apologize for the issues with scheduling yesterday, but thank you so much for tuning in. Those of you that are watching this after the fact, thank you as well. A lot of people ask me, what can we do to help? Well, I don't want your money. I don't. Just like the video and share it. When you share the video on Facebook or whatever, your friends are going to see it who may not be my friends, but it's going to get the show out to a different audience. So thank you very much. Stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.